No way. It's going to claim all the food for itself. It would only share food with kittens, her kittens. A mother would share food with her kittens, but somebody else's kittens normally just chase them away. So animals are very self-centered in their desires and don't even think about the idea of sharing. I have all this food, should I share it? I have more than I need. Yes.
Following that question, do animals have sin in it? Sin?
Sin. Yes, can animals sin? No, sin is saying the same thing. Animals can't sin because they're just fulfilling their nature. They have no choice. Sin, again, is when you have a choice. Should I do this, which is right, or should I do this, which is wrong, and harm someone? So we sin when we do something which will harm someone that we don't have to do. But animals don't have that choice. Okay? They have to fulfill their nature. They're very simple. They're not designed to make choices. It's making a negative choice is what causes sin or karma. Choice that ends up harming people. Yeah.
Following that question, how do you know if like something is right or if something's wrong?
Mm-hmm. How do you know if something's right or something's wrong? Well, there's a couple of ways to know. When you're young, you ask your parents. They'll give good advice. We're short on wise religious elder Hindus outside of Sri Lanka and India. But if you were in those countries, you could ask them, respected elders in the community, wise people. We're short on there, and there's some here. We can look in Scripture. Scripture gives lots of guidance. For example, the Tirukkural, you're studying Tirukkural someday. So it's very good, and you can tell by the chapter. You just look at the chapter headings if you want to know about anger, sharing, different virtues. You look for the heading and see what it says about it, and you can get a sense of what's right and wrong. And for something more sophisticated, in particular when you're older, you can rely on your conscience. Conscience means your reaction. You do something, you're not sure if it's right or wrong. How does it make you feel a week or two later? You feel good about it? You feel bad about it? You feel bad about it, it was wrong. It wasn't the right thing to do. And how do we have a conscience? Because we have a soul. And that soul pops through and guides us in that type of situation. So those are some of the ways. Yes.
Does an animal have rebirth? Like, does it also have...
Well, animals have rebirth in their own way, but they're different than humans. So we don't learn a lot from thinking extensively about animals. We learn more by thinking extensively about humans, because we're different than animals. So we have different guidelines and consequences for our actions, different expectations.
In this group, the persons like the human, and the next group, could they turn into animals?
If someone's a human, would they be reborn as an animal? Is that the idea? Usually not. There are some scriptures which will cite exceptions, but usually if you're a human being, you're reborn as a human being, and you don't need to worry about anything else. That's why human being is a wonderful thing. We have divine potential. There's another question in the middle. Okay.
So, can an animal become like a human if it actually changes? If it keeps on going in the cycle and finally reaches a stage, can it become a human?
Well, normally animals are animals and humans are humans. It's just the general sense in the scripture. You look at the Upanishads and it says God created the gods, God created humans, God created the animals, God created plants, you know. They're all separate in the Upanishads. There's no overlap. They were created differently in the first place.
More questions about your practice and more out for day-to-day life.
On a day-to-day life? Okay.
Like, let's say we don't have a lot of time to go to the temple, like
Mhm.
every day.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do to like satisfy
Well, that's very good. It depends. Hinduism is when you're young particularly, is part of a family effort, so it depends what your particular family is doing. But spending time praying in the shrine, if you have a shrine in the home, is good, particularly in the morning. So you pray in the home shrine in the morning every day. That's a really practice when you can't go to a temple. Also, if you're at a distance from a temple, which isn't the case here, but just in case anyone who is, if you're going to school in a place where there's no temple nearby, then you try and go to the temple at least for the festivals. You know, the festival days are much more powerful days than a regular day. So at least a few times a year you would try and take a day off from school or work or something and go to the temple for the festival time. Question? Yes, way back there. You're going to have to really speak loudly.
When you say pray, what exactly do you mean? I know people like the mentality that like myself and the Vietnamese they have is praying means like I want this and I want that.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it exactly like when you're saying praying? Is there a certain
Well, praying includes wanting this and wanting that. It's a valid type of prayer. We don't want to say that it's not. But praying means talking to the deity. I think that's a simple explanation. If you're talking to another person, we call that conversation. If you're talking to the deity, then that's prayer. So what you say is secondary to the idea that you're trying to communicate with the deity in some way. And asking for something specific in your life, asking for blessings, just trying to receive blessings. All of that is part of prayer. I think the point I probably didn't make clear, I was talking about it in the sense of, were you here when I talked about the temple being a bath to the mind? So in that sense, praying is opening ourselves to the energy that comes through the murky, particularly at the high points of the puja. So the high points of the puja are when they're passing the flames, and the high points of the puja is when it's loudest. That's a simple way to know what's the important time in a puja, when it's loudest. Have a simple system. You know, if you get a little sleepy something, there, you know, I'm back. So the idea is praying in that sense, the communication is one more of receiving energy or blessings. The idea works better in Hawaii, but stand outside and you feel the sun. And you close your eyes and still feel the sun without having your eyes open, right? You feel that energy from the sun hitting your body. So even without your eyes open, you can experience the sun when you're standing outside on a sunny day. So the temple is the same thing. Even though we can't see the deity, say for example Ganesha, even though we can't see Ganesha with our eyes, we can feel an energy or a blessing coming, and to be open to that energy or receive that energy is a form of prayer. So how do we receive that energy? Well, part of it is concentration, as we talked about in our music example. You heard that? So we need to be focused on it. And then we need to be kind of empty. So you take a sponge full of water and you put it in more water, what happens? Nothing, right? It's already full. If you squeeze the sponge empty and then put it in water, what happens? It absorbs. So likewise, we have to kind of empty ourselves for that minute of our other thoughts and feelings by focusing on the beauty of the deity, the beauty of the chanting, and so forth. Just think about the deity, and then it helps us receive the blessing, which is a form of prayer. So all that is valid prayer. Depends on the purpose of what we're trying for. Another kind of prayer is just to, if we're upset, to use the deity as a counselor. We can just talk to the deity as we would a friend and share our problems and griefs and all. And I encourage newly married couples to do that. I said, instead of coming home and dumping all your problems on your spouse, you can take them to the temple and dump them on the deity. The deity doesn't mind as much. So that's a form of prayer too, trying to work something out by talking it through with the deity as you would a person, and you can have insights and just feel better in the process. So all of those are valid forms of prayer. Yes?
You know, like in Toronto, there are like a lot of temples, right? Mm-hmm. And like, there's like one that's for each god. Like, for example, there's like Sri Ayyappa and Koyal, and then there's like another different one. Mm-hmm. How do you know which one to go to? Like, do you just go to each of them, or?
Well, again, Hinduism is a family activity when you're young, so part of it depends if your family has a deity that they prefer. If they don't, and if you have a choice which one to go to, we recommend going to the same deity. It doesn't have to be the same temple. But, for example, Ganesha, there's more Ganesha usually than anyone else. So if you were to choose Ganesha, you would focus on Ganesha first. That's the concept of Ishta Devata, or focusing on a singular deity, because it helps you draw closer to that deity. If you're going to this one, that one, that one, that one, this one, it's hard to feel close to any of them. But if you just go to the same one, not exclusively, but mostly, then it helps build up a rapport. So that's the idea of Ishta Devata, trying to build up a rapport with the deity, and quite often in the Silent tradition we go to Ganesha first, because it's easiest to build up a rapport with Ganesha first. He's kind of closer. It's easier to feel his presence from the physical world, we call him closer to the earth plane. Yes, question?
Is it the same if you pray in front of a statue of God, or if you're going to school and you're saying prayers? Is it the same thing? Or
it's the same
is there a
thing.
difference?
Well, it's easier to pray more deeply if you're in front of a statue, because it helps concentrate the mind. Part of the idea of having the murti, or statue, and having the murti decorated so beautifully, and priests are offering flowers and other things, is it helps concentrate the mind. Therefore our prayer is more concentrated. So the more concentrated it is, the more effective it is. So it makes a difference in that sense. Unless you're unusually expert in prayer, it's a lot easier in some of the murti. Yes.
Can we ever break the cycle of life? Like, can we, we break it?
We break it, yes. Well, we eventually break it by getting close enough to God. That's the idea. So when we live a religious life, as was suggested when we put the teachings into practice in our lives, then slowly, God's over here, we're over here.